Well, I found my bottle of 1 liter of Lugol's 2.2% solution without alcohol, just water based. And I found a large eyedropper bottle, but the stopper, the rubber, has solidified solid, so I can't use the eyedropper anymore. It's a funny thing that Lugol's does. It changes the rubber and takes away its flexibility. But then I have this smaller one that's so tight I can't open it. I'm going to have to figure out how to open it. But I got several others that I used. And what I did was I filled up a Fleet Enema bottle, 8 ounce or 7.5, with distilled water and added 64 drops of Lugol solution. And I also had to use soap to wash off the oil residue on the tip, because I didn't want oil to get in the way of my absorption of iodine in my rectum. And so I took in a little enema, and I retained my body wanted to retain the water very badly. It wanted the Lugol so badly. And then eventually I did expel a little bit, along with a little bit of poop. So what I did was I realized that, well, first of all, when I use this up, I know now that even though I can't buy it like this pre-made, I got this 1 liter amber jar, and I got 2 others. So now people sell it on Amazon, the ingredients for making your own Lugols. And that's why nobody sells it anymore, because everybody's figured out you can make your own. And you have to buy the ingredients from a foreign country, because in this country, no manufacturer is allowed to make this stuff. That's probably why they went out of business. It's not that you're not allowed to make it, it's just that you have to register with the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA, and it's a big deal. And then they got to have your shopping list, your customer list, all the customers who shop from you. I mean, it's like, it's very discouraging. And that's the whole point, because of vested interests. It's bad for the pharmaceutical industry for this kind of thing to become popular. So the United States has all the money, and we also have all the regulation to keep us from doing natural, effective, cost-effective, convenient methods for reducing the reasons for running to the doctor. It's not like the doctor is put out of business. It's just a lot of his business is taken away from him, because if we start to practice preventative medicine at home, then we don't have to see the doctor so much. And that's bad for his business, because they've gotten so used to being big business based on our ignorance. But Amazon, of all people, of all companies, has made it possible to really distribute a lot of goods and services worldwide in a way that couldn't have been done otherwise. So despite the fact that I don't like dealing with Amazon as a seller, as a publisher, they're actually pretty cool in terms of their distribution. Anywho, so I'm going to make my own. I'm going to start to learn. I'm going to get the ingredients and start learning how to make my own Lugols, because I learned something. I was lying in bed this morning and I felt really badly, and I realized a few things. I'm not going to become enlightened in this lifetime. There's no way. And apparently it's all due to Charlie Lutz making an error of judgment back in the 80s, in the sense that I was on a path of self-destruction. I was on a path of death, and I knew it. I was coming down with asthma attacks, which I didn't have except when I was a young child. I was having them again, probably due to stress-induced, but also because my body wasn't the healthiest, but mostly stress. So he tried to help me out, because I went to get a checking for my TM, and that, although it didn't take care of the asthma attack, I could live with it. I transcended it enough during the meditation that I drove home still with the asthma attack, but no panic. I didn't need to breathe. My metabolism was so settled that I didn't need the oxygen. I still continued to breathe shallow, just like we do in meditation. I came out with the same shallow breathing, and so I had no panic that I couldn't breathe due to the asthma attack. And that's what TM does. It it doesn't solve our problems, it solves our intolerance of problems. Now, being that I was congenitally defective at birth, I don't tolerate that. because my mom was an alcoholic while fasting on a raw food vegan diet. My father was not an alcoholic, even though he was fasting on a raw food diet, because he smoked a pipe. Now, had he encouraged my mother to smoke a pipe and my brother, who was only 7 years older than me, so he was just a child, to smoke a pipe or chew tobacco, then they would not have suffered the side effects of his insisting on being cost effective. In order to eat a raw food vegan diet is very expensive. You know, he didn't make a whole lot of money. He was a draftsman. He never got to be an engineer like he wanted to be, but he ended up in a banal dead-end career choice of being a draftsman in order to support a family. And in those days, you know, you could still afford to have your wife stay at home and be the mom, and only the guy go out and work. But still, he didn't make a whole lot. So we lived in an unheated bungalow-style home just outside of downtown LA, and it didn't require any heating, so he didn't have a heating bill. My mom needed the heat, though, because she was freezing, so she had a little room heater, a space heater. She toted around from room to room as she moved about the house doing her chores. But she suffered, and the pregnancy before me miscarried at 6 months, the beginning of the 3rd trimester, because she was an alcoholic. Not because she was fasting on a raw food diet, but because she was an alcoholic. The only factor that the raw food diet had was it made her physiology more refined, so that she became more sensitive to alcohol. See, normally on a cooked food diet or a meat-eating diet, the metabolism is jacked up enough that we can tolerate a small amount of alcohol use so long as we don't overdo it. The problem is, on a raw food vegan diet, there's no wiggle room for alcohol anymore. You have to have everything fresh, because alcohol is spoiled food, spoiled fruit, spoiled grain. So he was buying in bulk to save money. He'd go down to the, what do they call it, the central market. That's not the food. He didn't know. Well, I don't know where he could have gone down to the food wholesalers and bought. It's even cheaper there. But according to my mother, he went to the central market on Western Avenue, and she took me there once when I was a child to buy his stuff in bulk. You know, like a crate of vegetables, a box of fruit, a bag of walnuts, 50-pound bag, almonds, whatever. And so he bought everything in bulk, carrots, 50-pound or 25-pound bag, I think. And she made a lot of carrot juice and grape juice. She would blend the two. So that's a lot of sugar in the diet. But the stuff is in the garage fermenting in the summertime. And in the winter, her immune system was so depressed that she became quite ill. Every winter, more ill than the last winter. And she miscarried the pregnancy before me. And the only reason why she gave birth to me was due to her naturopathic or chiropractic doctor, she was saying, a lady, for her her neonatal care. She was seeing a non-specialist, somebody who was not an obstetrician, because she was going to be more natural, right? But she allowed me to be circumcised, so she couldn't. She, apparently not natural enough. And the alcoholism, certainly not natural. They had been better off if, and they didn't have seaweed in their diet. They didn't have iodine, and they were minerally deficient, as well as iodine deficient, as well as fasting on this raw food vegan diet. Now, if you look at pictures of my brother, he was in bliss. But that was after we left my father, and he started eating a normal food. Then he was blissful. Because they suffered a lot. He was a head shorter than his cousin, only 3 weeks difference in age, and the correct weight for his age group, but the wrong height. So he looked chubby, and he looked like Asian because he had the slit eyes, because he was chubby. So he couldn't even open his eyes all the way. He was sick. He wasn't healthy, and he was breaking bones all the time, but only because he kept climbing trees. Well, it was a sexual thing for him to climb a tree, so, what do you want for a little kid? Some release from all the frustration at home. Because he was sent home without his dinner. He was sent to bed without his dinner more often than not, because he refused to follow the diet when he left the house. when he went to school or he went to his friends' birthday parties, he pigged out all the hot dogs and cake he could eat, ice cream. He didn't want to eat vegan, raw food, because he knew he was an alcoholic. But my mother, devoted as she was, she remained an alcoholic. So she suffered the most, actually. And then I suffered inside her womb for the first 6 months. So I wasn't born entirely well developed physically. For some reason, the brain doesn't need for us to be on a meat-eating diet for it to develop during pregnancy. But you do have to be not an alcoholic. That is kind of a prerogative, because that holds back the rest of the development. The last trimester development of the fetus is the alcohol. If she hadn't been on alcohol, I would have come out. I never would have had problems getting born. Anywho, the point of this is alcohol kills, it prevents birth, it kills the fetus, and it kills spiritual development. And so I was sitting in bed thinking to myself, what a terrible shape I'm in, that I'm not going to reach enlightenment because of various factors. I'm a nudist. Charlie Lutz tried to help out in the late 1980s by trying to lasso me back into his small group of, friends of Charlie. And all it did was it inspired my intellect to solve problems. It did not give me a hunger or a thirst for enlightenment. Quite the contrary. I keep staying away from it. So I'm going to die and go through the process of extraction at the time of death like everybody else does when we die. And it'll be painful because I'm attached to the body. And so the extraction process will be painful. But I did one good thing. The first time I tried to improve my health, I fasted for 2 years on fruits and vegetables. More stringent than what my parents had conducted before I was born, because I had no nuts, no bananas, no avocados, no potatoes, nothing, no corn, no sweet corn, no peas, no green peas, nothing that would indicate putting on weight or trying to hold on to weight. Just salad greens, carrots and lettuce, celery, cucumbers, bell pepper, tomatoes, lemon, fruit, but no bananas and no avocados, and no nuts and no seeds. And so that kind of fasting diet, in 2 years' time, I ended up reaching GC, God consciousness, but I didn't need to do that for my meditation. I was only doing that to follow in the footsteps of my father, more idealistic than what he did. That's what children tend to do. They tend to be more extreme than their parents because they're idealists. They see through all the crap of the what do we call it when we compromise. We see through all the compromise, all the sacrifice. Well, I'll take away a little here, a little there because it's too much purity, it's too much idealism. We're trying to be practical grown-ups and raise a family and make a living. No, I was a kid, and so I could afford to be an idealist and be totally pure about it and just eat fruits and vegetables and fast and encourage the fasting process. So I actually did fasts during the fruit and vegetable diet the first 6 months because I wasn't going fast enough. So I did water fasts, I did dry fasts, I did all kinds of fasts during that first 6 months, and then I got rid of all my passion while fasting. So instead of falling asleep at night, I was partially awake. I would visit the heavenly plane while I was asleep, the astral plane, and it was great. I came back in the daytime with full memory of that visit, that nightly visit, and I was blissed out every day. Despite the fact that school was banality, just like, I was following in the footsteps of my father. My school life was quite banal and boring because, I was born with a slightly elevated IQ. What can I say? So school was entirely boring, and my mother was sorry she didn't put me in a private school, but be that as it may, school was entirely boring, and I had no way to amuse myself. So now I amuse myself with free energy on a simulator, but I still have a rotten body that wants to degrade and deteriorate at an accelerated pace, especially due to the antifreeze poisoning that I had 15 years ago, and 40 years ago I gave myself tons of parasites while hiking around Hawaii for 6 weeks on a raw food vegan diet, but I was not sterilizing my water. So here I am now to say that rather than paint my toenails with an alcohol-based 7% strength solution of iodine, I'm realizing that alcohol is holding me back. You know, for extreme purposes, if you want to burn off skin cancer, which I don't get anymore because I avoid sunbathing. You know, I might, if I sit out in the sun, it'll be for about 3 minutes. I time it, and then I get out of the sun because I know I'll come down with skin cancer, and then I'll have to burn it off with iodine, and I don't want to have to go through that procedure. So instead of having to deal with that, I stay out of the sun, so I really don't need to worry about skin cancer, so I don't need to use an alcohol-based iodine to really be effective. I can use a water-based 2% iodine and stay away from alcohol. So I decided that instead of painting my toenails, and instead of coating my penis and balls and pubic hair with dilute iodine, 16 drops per 2 ounces of distilled water, 16 drops of the 2% Lugols per 2 ounces of distilled water, I would instead use 64 drops of Lugols in a base of 8 ounces of distilled water in the Fleet Enema bottle to give myself a little enema. Because where the yeast is coming from is the colon. It starts there and spreads downwards mostly, but also upwards. And I have a friend who likes to say, well, gee, aren't you afraid, you know, you're killing off all the good bacteria in your gut? No, why should I be afraid? There's no good bacteria at all in my gut. I'm so in bad shape that all I have is bad bacteria. And it's a question of intensity of the bad. I don't have any good. The only time I have good bacteria is for about 30 seconds when I eat yogurt, and then it's dead in my stomach. All the good bacteria die. So I don't have to worry about killing off the good bacteria because I already do it automatically without any effort, spontaneously. So if for me to do any good is to make an effort to kill off the bad bacteria. And so and instead of trying to kill off the yeast, the long threads of yeast at the effect end of their growth, namely my feet, where they end up, they start though in the colon. So I gave myself an enema, and I'm going to see if about working my way up to an enema bag volume. You know, an enema bag is about 1 3/4 liters of volume. But right now it's a Fleet Enema. I'm starting small. And now I know I can make my own, so I don't have to worry about the fact that I can't buy a liter of pre-made stuff. I can make my own. I mean, I first learned about making my own several years ago when I made some videos on DMSO and iodine back in 2007, 8, 9. I'm not quite sure what the year was. That's about 10 years ago, a little over 10. But it wasn't well known, especially not on the internet, and it wasn't commercially available, all the raw ingredients as well as the formulation. People weren't into making their own iodine, their own Lugols. Well, now they are. So, unlike all the other people, I'll be making my own next month when I get the ingredients to stockpile, because I am going to use this in volume now, because I'm going to be washing out my colon. Because that's where the problem lies, not my penis, not my toenails, and this way I'll be able to stay away from the alcohol and not hold back my spiritual evolution, because I don't need alcohol in my life. I do need iodine, though, and it's really weird because iodine raises the consciousness of the cells, but alcohol pulls them back. It holds back the development of the consciousness, because the cells need to evolve too, you know, not just our consciousness. And when you're born weak like me, it's a concern to raise the consciousness of the cells of the body at the cellular level, which is the subconscious area of the physiology, as opposed to the brain, which is the conscious area. But the subconscious is holding me back, especially the colon, so why not clean it out? I'm doing everything else I can do. So I just took the evolution of this use of iodine to the next level and decided I gotta stop focusing on my penis and toenails and start focusing on my rectum and clean that out and purify that. And I'm looking forward to at least some improvement. The other problem I have, I'm a nudist and I don't mix well with people, I guess, because our culture is so into being still into reputation and appearance, and not at all concerned about, well, yeah, but clothes are an impediment to a natural life, so what are we doing wearing clothes? 400 years from now, nudity will be seen for what it is, along with the other things that I do, free energy, but not now. Not in this lifetime. I'm not going to have satisfaction, even though I would like to have satisfaction. It would be the death of me to have satisfaction, because I would inspire more anger than anything else within, demographically speaking, within the population, if I was successful at promoting all the different things and ideas that I get into researching, because most people have a repulsion against the kinds of things that I'm interested in, and they have an aversion, let alone a repulsion, against the very things that give me joy. So what can you do? I stick out like a sore thumb and I don't fit in. So I can't really push this idea of socialization. As much as my stepfather hated me for being antisocial and blamed one thing or another, you know, I don't like eating meat. Well, my father didn't like eating meat either, so what the hell is my stepfather complaining about? I mean, you know, it's like, give it a rest, right? And so when he claimed to my brother that I would never amount to much, I can see why he was saying that, because I don't fit in. He wasn't lying. My brother didn't like the statement and left the house and didn't come back, but, you know, what the hell? It's the truth. And it's not my fault. I don't like faking it to fit in. I can't. I just can't do it. I'd last about 2 seconds with the petty, trivial lies to fit in. I just couldn't last. So I'll die. I won't reach enlightenment because I have an aversion to fitting in. Because enlightenment would mean fitting in. Because I would be owning up to all of my karma, not just some of it. Because that's what evolution into enlightenment means. It means taking more and more stock of one's karma, which means taking more and more stock of one's consciousness. And the more consciousness we take ownership of, the more of ourself we become. But that means stepping into one's karma, and apparently I don't want to do it. As much as I want to keep my body healthy, I don't want to own up to all of my consciousness and all the karma that goes with it. Oh well, what can you do? It'll take death to convince me that enlightenment is worthwhile. That's the thoughts I was having this morning. And it's not a happy thought, but it looks like I'm just too much into my body, keeping it alive, keeping it healthy. And free energy is a hobby, what do you call it? A distraction, a happy distraction to dwell on free energy in our devices. But I also, that goes along with that style of thinking, I also want to be healthy in a natural way and not ignore what I know is wrong with my body and ignore what I know what to do about it. So that keeps me caught up with my body and I don't evolve. You know, Charlie said the cross, the Christian cross, is a symbol of two things in life that intersect. You know, we talk about what Eric Dollard says, you know, the crossing of two lines of dielectric lines of force, which are two electrostatic lines of force, creates the atom, the appearance, the illusion that the atom exists, that mass and matter and inertia and gravity exist, and electromagnetic radiation exists, when in reality, those are just effects. They're not causes. The prime cause is electrostatics, and that's what Tesla meant by his primary solar rays. They don't travel through space. They extend through space, but they don't travel. They don't have to travel. They just connect everything without traveling. So everything's connected without any traveling required. And yet, electromagnetic radiation doesn't travel. It can't. It stays put right where it is with the atom and goes into orbit around it. It can't travel. That would be a straight line. It can't go a straight line. So what we think we see as the movement of electromagnetic radiation is the combination of the electrostatic voltage gradient of the universe, making changes throughout the fabric of the universe, and the repercussion of those changes to the topographic voltage gradient map of the universe constitutes a delayed reaction of the changes of the electromagnetic field surrounding every atom. And that's the only time we appreciate changes throughout the universe, is when changes occur to the electromagnetic toroidal or donut-shaped orbital pattern of electromagnetic radiation in orbit around the intersection between two crisscrossing dielectric or electrostatic lines of force. And then we appreciate the speed of light as the square of the speed of light, as an illusory effect of what we think is the traveling of electromagnetic radiation, which no such animal exists. It does not happen that way. So that takes care of physics and free energy, what I just covered right there. But looking at it from a different standpoint, the cross represents something else. The horizontal arm represents the material plane, and the vertical arm of the cross represents the spiritual, and where the two meet is the human. And Charlie would say frequently, every human has to be crucified on his own cross of karma. And I'm not doing a whole lot of good for myself to grow in a spiritual manner. I'm doing a lot of good growing in a horizontal manner, in a material way, developing all kinds of skills, but I'm not doing anything for my spiritual development. I mean, I'm raising the growth, the evolution of my cells in the worst part of my body where they are asleep, namely from the pelvic region straight down to the bottom of my feet. But that's about it. So they're pulling me down, and so I want to elevate them so that they don't pull me down so much. But the most effective way is to take an enema with dilute Lugol's in a base of distilled water. Not to paint the toenails or coat the penis and balls and pubic hair with the stuff, because that's the effect of the yeast growing out from the colon and affecting those areas. It's trivial to treat those areas, is basically what I'm saying. So I'm changing how I do things. I want to be more effective, more efficient, and get more results, because everything we do, has limited impact. So what more impact can I have? So if I'm a nudist, why am I a nudist? Well, I became a nudist before I became aware of the fact that I have to take care of my health. Because as a 12-year-old, I didn't have any awareness about taking care of myself. I just was trying to take care of my frustration, my emotion, without necessarily taking care of my health, my body. That came later. So when I was fasting, I transcended my need to be a nudist. And that was a relief, because nudism as a way of life is inefficient for tackling the problems of life. It's okay as a solution, but it's not as effective as other methods are. And that's why I went and ended up fasting and washing out my colon as much as I did, because that's more effective than being a nudist. So the question then remains, how far can I take this iodine treatment, in the sense that will I actually become a non-nudist and transcend the need to be a naked person as much as possible? That remains to be seen. Because if I did, that means I'd be solving my problem in a most efficacious, a most efficient, and a most fulfilling manner to get at the root of the problem. That I make my own alcohol out of a candida condition inside my own physiology. That's the real problem. And then the nudity is just coping. It's not really solving anything. It's just a coping mechanism. Comfortable as it may be, it doesn't solve anything. Or resolve anything. Anywho.